Good evening, folks. Welcome to Soaring Prophets Thursday Night Live. We're lying to you. We're not really Thursday night. We're so full of shit tonight, folks. I don't know what to tell you. But with that being said, very, very interesting events over the last week. And to be honest with you, this schedule worked out sort of perfectly for everything that's been going on. We're filming this currently on Monday evening after the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump over the weekend in Pennsylvania. And this topic that we're going to be discussing tonight, this is sort of your warning now. There's going to be some things that are going to be brought up that are pretty emotionally hot button topics. There's going to be obviously a little bit of political angle to that as well. The last 24 to 48 hours has been a cesspool on the internet. No matter where you want to be on whatever angle this has been a wild 48 hours to watch. I've had conversations with loved ones, family members, all of these, and standing there watching the videos over and over and over and over and over again. This 24-hour news cycle, James and I have talked about it. It's sort of a weird way to live as a human. But I want to go right to our guest today. Todd Blyleven comes to us from the Walking Tall community. Chris Malazewski, who's been a friend of the channel for a very long time. Todd was... Survivor is not even where you start with this guy. This guy was a hero in the Las Vegas shooting of the Highway 91, the largest mass casualty shooting in the United States history. And again, this is the trigger warning now, folks, is that this is not an easy conversation. Todd does a fantastic job with what they've done with Walking Tall. You guys have met Chris before. But Todd, thank you so much for joining us tonight, pal.
Thank you for having me, Pat and James. It's not an easy conversation to have, but it's one that needs to be had, right?
100%, pal. And I want to thank you so much for joining us. And this was scheduled. This wasn't just that this happened to fall this way perfectly. Right. But honestly, pal, I think that it is sort of one of those perfect timing scenarios. I said in sort of my intro, there's not too many people out here over the last 48 hours that haven't had a holy shit type reaction to what's happened, whether you're pro Republican, pro Donald Trump or not. You can kind of leave your politics at the door, but humanity kicks in at some point. Todd, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your story, what happened in Vegas that night, a little bit about what happened, what your worlds looked like afterwards, because you've taken this amazing advocacy piece, this Walk Tall community that you and your team have built. And I think that story needs to be told in times like this because it has huge ramifications for our time today.
Yeah, I appreciate that. A little bit about my background, just because I think it brings validity to what we're talking about. So I grew up in a Major League Baseball household. I played professional baseball. I was a Major League scout, grew up sports, tough. Hold your emotions in. Don't express your feelings, especially if you're scared or fearful or if you're hurt. You just kind of grind on and the sun comes up tomorrow type of attitude. And, I took that into my marriage and everything else. And on October 1st, 2017, I found myself at a country concert in Las Vegas, Nevada, where we had been before. Multiple years with 18 of my family and friends, my wife, my brother-in-law, kids that we considered to be our nieces and nephews. They called us aunt and uncles. And a madman, 32 stories up across the street in Mandalay Bay decided it would be a good idea to pull out some guns and shoot down on 26,000 people. And I'll tell you, guys, when you're there and all of a sudden you're dancing and everything's just smooth and your nieces and nephews are taking video of you dancing with your other niece, and then you hear these popping sounds, it is like you hear a couple days ago people giving testimonies about hearing a noise, hearing a popping noise, not really sure what that was. I can still hear that noise. That vibration that runs through an open environment is, especially from an elevated position, is unlike anything. And right. You have nightmares about it. You really think about the victims that are being hit. And in that night in Las Vegas, all of a sudden we went from dancing to dropping down on a knee when the machine gun fire started, especially in that second round. And you're starting to see people get hit right around you. And we were in that kill zone. And, your first reaction is drop and cover, identify where this is coming from. Luckily, I was able to see a muzzle flash above me, and you get your family up. You tell everybody to get up and run, and we ran as far away as possible. I was able to get my family out, thank God. And, I think it's important when you really think about the heartbeat of it and what you really go through. And in Trump's rally, you saw something a little different, which was, I think, we should talk about later. You saw people stand up. Yeah. You saw people almost get vigilant right away when that man up on that stage went down. It was a sense of anger almost that you could see in people, and a stance of, we're not doing this anymore. We're not going to run. But in my case in Las Vegas, everybody ran. And naturally, because there were multiple victims being hit all at one time. And so I was able to get my family out, and I pushed them on north, and I ran back in. I knew that I was going to get shot at. I knew that there were going to be victims down on the ground, but I had to give everything I possibly had to try to lift and run people out to safety as best as I possibly could. God put me on that spot right then and there to make a choice, and I chose yes. And it didn't matter what color you were, what politics you believed in, or anything else. It was just people needing help. And so I did that over and over. I carried a lot of people out over my shoulder and my arms. I ended up losing 3 women in my arms that night, 2 that passed away in the hospital later on that I had heard about. I got out a lot more that lived. The stories, the thank yous, and everything else that I've received have just been amazing. I still get them today. But there's nothing like, I can resonate. I can relate to the people that were in the stands that held that firefighter in their arms as, he's taking his last breath, and his family was there. I can relate to that. I held a woman in my arms that passed, and you just stand up and you just question, what the hell is going on? Right. But you keep going, right? It's that perseverance, that side, that the Secret Service men that came onto the stage and just without instincts. And I know it's their job. It's what they're trained to do. But in that moment, you can go over as many times as you want what you think you're going to do. Yeah. And in that moment, the bravery and the pure just fight in those guys and women, the men and women, they jumped on former President Trump, and they shielded him with their lives, not knowing. You don't know that there's a single shooter up on a roof. You don't know what's on. You don't know if we're being attacked. You don't know if it's multiple. You don't know if bombs. That's the way Vegas was. We thought we were literally under attack for 8 hours until at the end of that night, and I'm rushing through that because, definitely we have a lot to talk about. But at the end of that exhaustive night, I found myself with 4 individuals, but 3 in particular, an off-duty EMT, fire captain out of San Francisco, and a Marine. And we were literally guarding people. We're breaking down doors in the Tropicana trying to find a shooter that was supposed to be in the building. At the end of the night, I'm tackling a man with a knife at the end of this long hallway. I'm disarming this man. We're patrolling, profiling all these people with 300, 400 people in a big area. And 2 SWAT officers came up to us and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Sir, you can stand down." And they stood over me while I collapsed and just cried, man. And, the aftermath, and we'll get into this, but the aftermath of it is you walk out of there going, what the hell just happened? How do I now? I got into my truck and I was able to get back to my wife, give her the kiss that is like from the movies where I'm coming in this way, because there were 4 individuals those guys, I'd love to meet them one day, but they had they were at this Desert Rose resort, let 26 people that were running for their lives into their condo. They barricaded the place. She was sheltered in there with those men and her brother and his wife. But I had 1% battery life after all this, and I find her come walking into the Desert Rose resort. She's walking in from the poolside, and we meet in the lobby, embrace, kiss. It was all just the whole I'll never forget my lips touching hers, because it was peace. I went from total chaos and craziness to this beautiful world of, man, I'm okay now. And that's where I think we're at today. A lot of Americans, a lot of people all over the world that have been watching this are feeling that sense of, where am I? Am I going to be okay? What's going on with this world? So I can really empathize with a lot of that. And, I had so much support coming out. First, I'm sitting in my truck in Dallas, and I've got to go pick up my kids, and I got my job, and how am I supposed to go back to work? And you think about the sniper on the roof, from the Secret Service side. You think about our Secret Service agents, even though they did what they were supposed to do,
right?
They're thinking about it. Their speech is probably a little better. They're having that nightmare, and I'd love to talk about this too, and please cut me off, but
no. Absolutely not. Todd, I want to take this second, because there's aspects of that story. I followed you and Chris for a while, because again, I look at you guys, what Chris went through with the July 4th shooting in Illinois there. Again, just being involved with that, the hearing, all the things that go along with it. I didn't realize that you were going in and tracking potential suspects. This is a whole layer of this that I was totally unaware of. Like that is so much more. We talk about sheepdogs mentality, right? That there's wolves and there's sheepdogs, and you come across as that type of personalities, that you were a protector that night. You took on that sheepdog mentality, and you jumped in to do what otherwise was a chaotic hellscape. I could not even imagine. And then trying to get back to your family, 1%. I want people out there that are listening right now to just think about what that's like at the amusement park in your community when your phone dies. Yeah. And the panic, the theory of, I don't know, how am I going to get in touch with, the wife, the kids, oh shit. And now you got somebody shooting at you. Like, there is such a profound existential view. We can't understand it. Yeah. It's such a perverse thought for the average individual that hasn't done that. Dude. I
had a lot of people trying to get a hold of me that night. I was able to get on the phone every so often and just let people know I'm still alive, I'm okay, and then I'd hang up and run back in. And there was definitely a lot to do. At some point, things seemed like they were, we had gotten as many out as we possibly could, those that were living, and we were told there's a whole line of people trying to get loaded up into an ambulance, kind of Uber line now at Tropicana. So me and 3 other brave individuals, we run across the parking lot, we're putting people in, and I'm on the phone with my wife at this time for about 10 seconds, letting her know I'm okay, and a police officer screeches up and says, we need to get everybody inside, there's a shooter up on the roof. So now act number 2, act number 3.
So they're saying a secondary shooter. They think a secondary shooter.
Because there were 26,000 people there were over 800 that were injured. Those people are running into casinos, bloodied up. And now the people at the casinos are like, oh my God, there's a shooting here. So police was scattered everywhere, which is why there was the whole assumption. I was on the phone with an FBI terrorist task force friend of mine. I was on the phone with a Secret Service agent friend of mine. I was on the phone with an LAPD Metro that was in constant contact with Vegas Metro. Everybody's story, all 3 of those guys, with all the data they have, were all different. I was telling my FBI buddy, I'm like, he said there's 8 bodies down. I said, no, there's not. There's so many more. You need to send the world here. Yeah. So they were getting information from people like myself that were boots on the ground, running back and forth, doing what we could. The inspiring part to all of that, and I think we can talk about this as we talk a little bit later about what happened a couple of days ago. And I'll get back to the why we were over in Tropicana first. We were over there to load people into ambulances. All of a sudden now we're finding ourselves bringing people into the back entrance of Tropicana, into a tunnel where the employees and they have all their laundry and everything else goes. And it reminded me almost of a sports stadium, a tunnel that went into locker rooms and everything else. Well, so we get all these people in, everybody's down the hallway, about 200 people all lined up. They're sitting down, crying, screaming, and we have these triage centers made up of people that were injured. And now one guy says, we need to clear the 2 hallways to our right and left in case there's a shooter inside. We're sitting ducks.
Right.
So we're like, okay, so we split up. Now I've got a Marine, I got an EMT that never left my side, and I'm hitting doors, barreling them open. And what we're finding is 20 people stacked up in the corner in a dark room that were scared to death, that ran from the concert, it found their way into these areas and were just literally hiding. And turns out I ended up finding one of my family members, our group, in the hallway, in that room, and she screams out, "Todd," and comes jumping on me. And it was absolutely it was amazing. And there's so much more to that story, but I get her into an ambulance because she had been grazed, I believe, by a bullet in her kneecap. And all of a sudden, as soon as I get her into that ambulance, we're told there's a man with a knife at the end of the hallway, and you're literally running 50 yards down this tunnel to get to it. And you see the man doing this with a knife, and all of us, what are you supposed to do? I got my hands, right?
Yeah.
So I'm running up. I figure I'm going to scare the hell out of this guy. And so I'm good guy, bad guy. And I'm screaming at him, and he looks this way, and I was able to grab his hand and throw him up against the side of the wall there and disarm him. It was total chaos just like that up until the moment they said, "Sir, you can stand down." Yeah. And I think about, the vigilance that the people displayed when you saw former Trump go down. Right. Yes, there were a lot of people that did the right thing. You do not want to stand up in an active shooter situation. You want to get down. You want to identify where you're at, try to identify where that shooting's coming from, find coverage, and lay low until you're either hearing the shooting stop and they're in between rounds, possibly reloading, and try to move quickly and try to get to that next coverage point. And then from there, you're doing the same thing. I ended up doing that in one of the rounds where I was hidden behind this Budweiser booth. There was a corpsman that was stuck out in the middle of the turf, and he wasn't moving. I said, "Get," in explosive language, "get down." And he goes, "My knees are locked up. I can't move my legs." So I went in like a defensive end. I picked him up, and then I just ran him out. And as I'm running, he says, I'm a corpsman. And the inspiring part to all of this, too, is that when I got him back onto Giles Street, where all the people were bringing all the people out, I said, "You need to get down and you need to do what you were trained to do and start helping these people." Right. A couple of people later, I come back out and I lay a woman down that was non-life threatening, and I look over at him, and he's on his knees, and he's over somebody, and he's helping. So his instincts kind of kick back in. He probably had suffering with PTSD at that moment.
100%.
Froze because he's probably combat vet, and just it shocked his body. You never know again how you're going to react. But pure chaos.
Yeah. I think you said a ton of interesting things, and I know you hate hearing it, but man, you are a true hero. There are not a lot of people. We were talking to a fireman last week, and I talked about how anyone who runs towards the danger is a hero. I don't care if you don't think so. I don't care if you've been trained. I don't care in any way, shape, or form how much training you have. If you're running towards the danger, when I'm running away, you're a freaking hero, and you are a hero. And you know what? Thank you so much for taking care of all those people. It is an inspired story out of a very tragic time for a monster to do something such evil. But you said a lot of interesting things, and this is kind of where I want it to go a little bit, and I hope it's okay. So you've given us a lot of information about what happened during that time, and so this has nothing to do with that. But I know in a car accident per se, I don't remember what's going on. I react, you come at it, and then days later you get flashbacks. And you're like, "Oh yeah, man, I grabbed a coffee at that time, or this happened at that time." What was it? Obviously, you were in a different mental state up until that person said you can stand down now, which is just crazy moment. Was it afterwards that you got these details, or is it something that was just in your head, drilled into your memory forever? Because what I'm trying to get to is it's a PTSD level of flashbacks that people may not get, especially when former President Trump got shot. Even the people that weren't shot, the people standing there watching it happen, watching it go down, knowing that their child or their loved one was in danger, are going to be suffering these kind of flashbacks and remembering details that will keep them awake at night. And I was just wondering if maybe we could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, 100%. And thank you for bringing that up too, James. And yeah, I do not consider myself a hero. I went in and I did what I hope someone would do for me. I think the brave men and women that, wear the badges and wear our uniforms, for whether it's for Canada, whether it's for America, or whether it's for anywhere in the country, when you stand up to tyranny and you choose every single day to lace up those shoes and to tighten that belt and to button your collar up and go out to work knowing that your life is on the line every single day. Those men and women are teachers, are educators, are hospital staff. They're all heroes. So I just did a part trying to help people. But I appreciate your words. I think that, when you're talking about the aftermath, I was completely lost. And when you go through a traumatic experience and you think about all the different shootings, unfortunately, we've had, the bombings, Israel, all these different really crazy, horrible acts of violence. But when you're a victim inside that and you're experiencing that mass trauma, think of it like a movie. When you watch your next TV show, that movie is all cut up into different minutes of time. And it's miscombobulated because that's the way your mind is allowing you to process those bad things that just happened and things that you have never experienced or coped with, or your mind says you have never done anything that's closely relatable to that. I've never held a woman in my arms when she's taken her last breath. I've never held someone running them out thinking, oh my God, each step is one last breath. And when you're doing that, your mind blocks it and it puts it in the back corner of your brain. And unfortunately, you end up getting kicked. Like, that's the bad headache. That's the bad nightmares. You can't figure it out. There was a time I was screaming at this old man. I remember in the very beginning, I'm like, why was I screaming at this old man? I could see the visual. He's walking on the street. I'm yelling at him. Was that before the shooting? Was it after the shooting? Come to find out, I had just carried one woman out over my shoulders. The two friends were following me. I got them in the car. The old man was walking and they had an empty seat, and I wanted him to be in the car just because I wanted a man to be in there as the girl was taking the three girls to the hospital. And I'm screaming at him and he's telling me to F off and all these things. And I'm like, sir, don't you know where we're at? Well, I didn't know that until I ended up meeting two of the girls, because the one that I carried out ended up passing in an operating room a day later. But the girl said, do you remember yelling at that guy? And I'm like, oh my God, tell me about this. And she said, you were yelling at that man. And so then I filled in the blank. She said, yes. And I said, okay, I'm not crazy. Like, that really happened. I know, like, F that guy, whatever. But she told me, and I said, well, then what'd you see? And she said, as we were driving off, you ran back in. And then now all of a sudden, so I'm working with my therapist. So the other part to this is I had a lot of support. I had a lot of support from combat vets, firefighter friends, law enforcement, Secret Service, FBI. I had all kinds of buddies coming to my rescue, wanting to be my rocks, right? Amazing. And they were sharing their relatable experiences and what one of them, he was my best man at my wedding.
That's awesome.
He shared a story that I had never seen before or never heard him talk about, and he was totally vulnerable with me, and we were just men to men. Like, we both checked our tough boxes off, totally raw, right? And it made me feel safe. It made me feel secure. And then, I was recommended to go to EMDR therapy. And so I started looking for an EMDR therapist, went through a couple, finally found one that she was a seasoned veteran with combat vets. She probably nothing I could really tell her she hadn't heard before. I knew I wasn't going to break her, which is really important when you go to therapy, right?
Yeah.
That's crazy though. Like that is a crazy that you have to plan out how you're going to explain this to a therapist so that you're not overloaded. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it happens all the time, man. Like I'll talk to cops. I get all kinds of calls now. Like a police officer, officer involved shooting up in the Northeast, loses his partner right there at his feet, tries to go to therapy, can't talk to the therapist, lets it go for 3 years, attempts to eat a bullet at some point in that. Here's my story about how I was finally able to find somebody. The way I just described it, probably people have been telling him, but the way I described it on how I was able to vet out this therapist, I found her. I talked to her a little bit. She let me know, hey, I'm okay. You need to talk because otherwise it's not going to work, right?
Yeah.
No. But EMDR therapy allowed me to take 1 minute of time. It was an EMDR therapy mixed with talkative therapy. I use the vibration paddles, and the paddles go left and right, and it basically allows your brain to kind of go back and forth, and it starts to lower this drawbridge of all the bad crap that you witnessed. And what she does is she'll turn it up. I'll be talking about a certain place where I was at. She'll ask me to really describe everything. The wind, what was it like? What did you hear? Where did you see? Where did you look down? Where were your boots? Do you remember how far off the curb you were when you laid that man down? All these different things. And then she'll close it. And because that's the 1 minute of time she wants to process, and then we'll talk about it. And in that talking, I'm looking her in the eyes and I'm crying. And I mean, I feel it now. Like that's where it gets heavy. But that's the process part, right?
Yeah.
And so from there, it's you're learning how to process. You're learning how to create these spidey senses of when I go to a restaurant, for example. And this is where, all these poor people that were just in this situation or any type of James, you brought up a car accident, like any type of trauma. You don't have to be in a shooting, man. Like any type of trauma that you've experienced, whether it's a kid or as an adult, you've lost someone close, you're just having a hard time. EMDR therapy really unlocked it, and it allows you to process. And what it does is it now starts to take that traumatic event and it keeps it out here for you. This is the best way I try to describe it to people. And through your hard work of your peer support, you learning more about where you are, the person that you are at that moment today, when you're in a crowded environment, like in my case, and I start to feel that trauma get up on me, I can feel I'm starting to lose my train of thought. Right. My voice starts to crack. I'll stutter, which is my big thing when I really get nervous. I can feel that thing kind of crawl up into the back of my throat. I can the anxiety's there. It's getting deep. That's when the trauma is right here now. And it's about to turn around and kick me in the back of the head. And that's where we lose people. When you don't know how to control that trauma and you don't know how to ask for help or talk about it, that's when suicide rates climb. That's when people just can't take it anymore because you feel isolated, you feel alone. So it's your job to learn about yourself today. The people that experienced that, the people that viewed that are feeling anxiety or pressure or maybe scared just to leave their homes or whatever else. Yeah. Go see somebody. Find a relatable therapist that can talk to you about that type of situation. Maybe it's EMDR, maybe it's talkative, maybe it's something else. But talk to somebody. Find someone else too that's had a relatable experience, or maybe just talk and say, hey, are you feeling this way? I saw that on TV, and oh my gosh, even the sight of the blood on the former president's face, like it's just got me. I've had a kind of a nightmare. It's like, what are you thinking? The more we talk about it, the more it's gonna allow that drawbridge to kind of open up and close. Don't try to press yourself and be too strong and too courageous to push through everything. You're not going to get over it. You just won't.
Well, Todd, I think that's such a unique way of doing it. And again, we've had a few guests on here. Obviously, we've done a lot of work with Chris, our guest last week, yourself now. That's the best way I've ever heard it put.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of friends that are, military, fire, cops, those types of guys. And when they talk about PTSD, they struggle with around being seen as weak or soft or that sort of thing. Yeah. And Todd, you have such a unique way of explaining that in a way that, you're learning about your tell. Yeah. You're figuring out what you've got going on in this moment because of X, Y, Z that's going on around you, external stimulus, all that sort of thing. And that you can leave the tough guy at home. I'm not weak. I'm not, tough guy. I'm nowhere in between. Is that there's a stimulus. I have to address it. We're going to deal with it right now. The drawbridge aspect, which I think is an incredibly powerful metaphor for individuals. And I think that's why you're so successful. Todd, you have an amazing story. You tell it so well. I still sort of think you're maybe a bit of a hero. We're not going to let you off the hook.
A little bit.
Yeah, probably a pretty good curveball in your day, but I'm just saying.
Not my dad's. Yeah. Not my dad's.
We'll let it slide. But like, it's an amazing story to sit back and be like, at this event, and then I'm beating the shit out of a guy with a knife. And I like how you get to those two things is just a wild story, a wild day. And then you have the poise. And I really do mean this, Todd. It's been a really cool opportunity to have you here. But a poise to be like, I've done the work, I've got it where now I understand the drawbridge in my mind when I need to take a moment and I'm going to address this on a very singular, granular level so that I don't end up in a situation where I can't handle. Because clearly, Todd, you can handle situations. You've proven that, right? Yeah. What do you say to individuals when they're reaching out to you? What is sort of the first step? You get those, the first responders that are calling you guys with Walking Tall. What does that sort of look like?
Well, first you listen, right? You got to listen. You can't just butt in and talk about, hey, I know what you're feeling like, this and that. You got to really listen. You got to just be an ear. And that I learned that from my pals. I call them my pals, my rocks that listen to me. And so you got to listen. You got to identify where they're hurting, what situation that is. I was talking to a Navy SEAL. He's still having nightmares. Listen to me talk. I did a speaking engagement in Kentucky or Connecticut, and he says, "Hey, can I talk to you for a second?" Now he pulls me off to the side and he tells me who he is and tells me what he did. And he says, 20 years ago, I was in battle, and I had to perform a tracheotomy on a friend of mine, on a teammate that was down. Yeah. And so he drew the little thing, and he was going to stab him with a pen to, relieve the pressure and all this stuff. Corpsman comes over, stops him, all this stuff. He would have killed him if he hit him in this particular spot.
Wow.
Out of all the craziness that individual, think about a Navy SEAL, right?
Yeah.
That those people go through.
Yeah.
That has haunted him for 20 years. I said, have you called him? Have you talked to him? Have you expressed your just your nightmares over him? Have you heard his voice? And so through that kind of conversation, he calls him, he breaks down, he calls me a few days later, he says, "Hey brother, I just want to let you know, man, I cried, we cried, we're going to get together. It was amazing, best night of sleep I've had." Those are like the amazing stories. And then you get others that are just so deep into it. And it's really just trying to get them to understand that we've all experienced the silence after a post-traumatic stress area, right? So whether you're in a car accident, whether you've just been yelled at by whomever, whatever that situation is, or unlucky like me being in a mass shooting or like we just saw a couple of days ago, there's a moment, and James, you started to touch on it, where everything stops and it's quiet. And that's where you're scared to death. You don't know what to do. And in that moment of silence, you need to break that up. You need to ask for help. And if you're a friend and you know that your person, that friend of yours or that soulmate or whatever that is, that child of yours, just went through a crazy time or has questions, you need to talk about it. You need to break that silence up, because it happens too much with our military, our law enforcement officers. They're singled out, at least fire, and I'm not trying to shed any lightness on this, but firefighters, when they go out in a team of 5 or 3 individuals, they're coming back to that firehouse, processing that together, right? They have these routines now in these firehouses where they're really trying to increase that mental wellness. But our police officers and our cops, man, they don't have that. So they're going from call to call, maybe not even get a chance to process all that stuff. That silent mode is running with them from call to call. They're trying to do their job. It's a sad thing. When COVID was going around and all of our nurses and our doctors would lose a patient, that silence, nobody talks about it. So I talk a lot about trying to break that silence up and then trying to identify where your trauma is in relation to your body. And if that trauma starts to creep up on you, my biggest advice is try to break away, separate from wherever you're at, go into the bathroom if you have to, and you're kind of embarrassed and you don't want to like say anything to your buddies or whatever. Maybe we're all just drinking beers and you feel that anxiety on you, man. Like, go into the bathroom, close the stall, just sit down a little bit and just take a deep breath. Understand you're safe. Create your safe place, right? Put your back up against the wall. That's why whenever I go in to eat, my back's usually always against the wall. I've identified the exit points, which is the biggest lesson to anybody that's listening to this. Anywhere you go.
Anywhere. Yeah.
Anywhere you go. Unfortunately, it is what it is, and it's not to put scare into anyone, but just identify where those exit points are. Identify key areas where, if God forbid something happens to my right, I know I can get to my left. If something happens here, I know I can get there. I'm going to grab my wife. I'm going to grab my kids. I'm going to leap over this. I'm going to be able to get there, or I can stay in place. Just understand it, and then sip on a beer and have fun at your concert or whatever, wherever you're at, right? But yeah, it's always different, Pat. I mean, all you can do is just try to be there and work with more love in your heart. That's the biggest piece too. Show empathy to somebody that's hurting and down, and try to instill resilience. Try to instill strength in them. Lift them up by the collar and say, "Hey, get up, walk tall."
Yeah. I think it's important that you say that you're not alone. I think that's what you're saying over and over and over again. My experience isn't your experience, but you're not alone in feeling the feelings and the reactions that you're having, whether you're displacing it upon your spouse, whether you're just holding it in and you are constantly attacking yourself because of it, whether you have to run into a bathroom and make sure, bring yourself back to safety. It's interesting you say that because in some of the work I've done with kids, when they start getting upset or they start feeling scared, because a lot of times when that behavior hits, they start getting scared. A lot of the things we do are like, touch this, feel this, smell this. And it centers them back to, no, I'm safe. This is all safe here. And I think that's super wise. I also like that I talk to a lot of people about this, and I've mentioned it on Soaring Prophets, is that don't go to one therapist. Like, you're going to show up. That therapist could be atrocious. I've talked to so many people, including Wendy, who is fine with me sharing her story. She was from a recovery speaking initiative. Unfortunately, she was sexually assaulted. And she went through many therapists, including one that told her she should just get over it, that it wasn't a big deal. And you're going to run into these people. But eventually, if you keep on going, like you said, you'll find that therapist that can help you unlock the trauma, because that is, you can't, like what you said, you can't unlock it all at the same time. It's just not, you're not capable of that. I wonder if you could talk more about that. Why is that so important to do segments? Because it is important. It doesn't matter what trauma you're in. It's important to talk to people about your story, but it's also important to analyze those segments of it.
Yeah, you are 100% right. If I want to get in shape again, I'm not going to go down the street and run 10 miles and then I'm in shape, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a process. If I'm going to lose weight, it's a process. If I hurt my shoulder as an athlete, I got to go through therapy in order to get myself back in a timely manner. And when you go through therapy, it is a process, and you have to understand that this is a journey. I got to rediscover myself. I need to redefine who I am in my existence. Plus, too, you're also dealing with a lot of new sensories, and you're going to see this in former President Trump. I guarantee it. You're going to see it. You're going to see it around people that he hangs out with. You're going to see it around people that were victims in that shooting, where all of a sudden the love, the appreciation for life, the empathy, the vulnerability comes out. It's amplified because now I've been shot at. I've felt death.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
nothing worse. I've seen the worst in mankind. So if I wake up, all right, let's go. I've got a routine every morning, and I'll get back to the therapy part. But I've got a routine every morning. When I get up, I make my bed, I pat my pillows, I get my feet into my slippers, and when I turn around, I say a prayer. I say, please, Lord, give me the love, give me the strength, and give me the patience to have the best day of my life today. And I move forward. That's me moving into today's craziness. Whatever I'm going to encounter, I'm balanced and I'm solid. And I know that I've got control of me, but I didn't get here easy. You need to take the time. And each one of those segments, James, that you're talking about, you learn more about yourself. And so the idea is that if you can learn enough about what creates those triggers, what that trauma, what that does to you internally, why you're having the nightmares, why all of a sudden, okay, my head's starting to pound a little bit, I can feel it. You don't all of a sudden get that. But over time, you start to learn more about your body and what the insides are doing now. Now that trauma's here. And when you do it right, that trauma's going to stay there most of the time unless there's a trigger like what happened yesterday in my case, or something else, right? But for the most part, you're grabbing control of it. And when you get it here, I'm telling you right now, when you get your trauma to this part right here and you can walk forward, you are literally walking taller than you've ever walked before, and you are feeling strong and confident, and there is nothing in this world that can stop you. Nothing. You're kind, you're peaceful, and you just have harmony around you, man. And it's really just, it's an powerful thing. So
Todd, you are as billed. It's been a very cool conversation with you tonight. And, kind of coming full circle here, we have the shooting this weekend. I love that you brought up the empathetic aspect around the things that you're going to probably see out of Trump. Literally just before I had jumped on here, Trump did an interview with a reporter, and he said exactly those words.
Exactly.
Like, he's like, I should not be here. There is, God willing, I am still here. You can see where he's processing that. I lean a little bit right. I'm probably Republican at heart. We don't have Republicans in Canada. We're conservatives. But there is no place where I watched that for hours and hours and hours yesterday. It was wild. Like, I've never lived through that. 9/11 was as close to it as I can come, and I was in high school watching it on news. That the world is a very odd place. When you're saying, if you were giving advice to Donald Trump tomorrow, what would you say to him? What does it look like from Todd to Don sitting there? He doesn't drink, so you're going to be in trouble trying to have a beer with him. But
water.
There you go. But what do you say to him? Like, how do you, dude, you just went through this. What's tomorrow look like for you?
Take a deep breath. Embrace the moment. Be selfish for a little bit. It's okay. People are going to understand that. Be as vulnerable and as compassionate as you possibly can. Unfortunately, we had a gentleman lose his life. A true hero, a firefighter.
Yeah.
But be compassionate. I think that what I often wish upon this to people, and it's not that I want people to see my 13 seconds of memory. I did a TED talk on it. I don't want them to visualize the gore and the blood and everything else that I saw. I want them to feel what I felt. Because if the politicians and all of our world leaders and all these different people can actually feel what former President Donald Trump went through in that moment when that bullet grazed his ear, and he goes down realizing that he is the target in somebody's sights, right? Regardless of how much stuff, he could lose his life right there, because you don't know what's coming.
Right.
Your life is on the line, and you don't know how you can try to replicate that, like I was talking about in the beginning.
Right.
You can try to replicate that feeling, everything else. His senses are going to be enlightened. He's going to be more compassionate. He's going to be more faith-driven, I'm a huge faith.
Amen.
God, I know, is with me.
Yeah.
I'm welded at his hip. Jesus, I know if I need a hand, it's there. I've got a whole faith-based piece to this. I know I was not alone that night. I had angels watching over me. There's no way a 6'5", 260-pound well, I'm probably giving myself some credit here on the weight, but there's no way at that time wearing a big old cowboy hat, getting shot at, that you're going to miss me. There's no way unless I've got somebody there protecting my ways. And I would just tell him and anyone really that has gone through an unfortunate situation to just relax, be selfish for a minute, try to identify where you're at, become safe, draw that safe circle around yourself, and just embrace what's about to happen. Because if you do this right, you're going to end up becoming one of the greatest people you're ever going to know in your life, right? You're going to be more in touch with yourself. You're going to love more. I tell you, man, I talk about it. It's funny, but butterflies to me, a beautiful sunset. I take my time now to embrace it.
Right.
I mean, I'm tough. I already know I'm tough, but now I'm okay to share those inner feelings. So
yeah, absolutely.
It is
I think
absolutely true that you are tough, and I like how you said that. Take a moment to be selfish because you just went through something horrible, which he did. I think it's disgraceful the way media and TikTok, and I'm sorry that I'm bringing this up, but I think it's disgraceful, people watching from the outside trying to spread more hate and lies over this when a hero, a true hero died. And whatever you think about the former president, he was shot at and almost died.
Those people have not gone through that.
Absolutely.
And if one of their family members or they themselves went through that, James, and I think this is your point, then they would not be putting those stupid dumbass TikToks up or Instagram posts, or the people in the media wouldn't be, they'd have reservations in saying something bad about that, regardless of whatever station you work for or whatever country you're from, right? Yeah. You wouldn't say it if your life was on the line like that, like he was.
100%.
So,
and that's just it. That is, sorry, Pat. That is definitely the point
I get all fired up about it because this is my weekend.
You brought up the Secret Service that protected them, and there's all these different angles and videos that I'm watching, and people, cutting them apart and saying that they didn't do this. You are trained to do it. The last president to get shot at was Ronald Reagan. You don't know. I work with behavior people all the time where I deal with extreme behaviors, and I have had, you would never think that they would have a problem in a situation where there's danger, because sometimes we're in danger, and they freeze. They're immobile. They can't talk, they can't move, and they can't even help you. And you're in a serious situation, and you have to yell at them, just like you said, get the fuck out of here, or do something. And then they snap out of it. To say that those Secret Service that threw themselves in front of the president to protect him did anything but their job, I don't care how it looked, where they stood. You can watch that from an angle. You weren't there. And I'm telling you right now, the people that are saying these horrible things about both what happened, the president, are gross. You weren't there. You don't know. I don't care what you think about the president. You don't know. And I really don't like how they're drumming up more hate over this.
Well, the shooter just didn't shoot at a former president. The shooter shot at all of us that are standing up for good. So anybody that believes in the good of mankind, that we all should be treated equally, that we all deserve a chance to just live this life with love and peace, and we want the best for our children, and those kids walking. Anybody that believes in that was a direct assault on you. We're not talking about politics or anything else. That was a direct assault against mankind wanting better. Yeah. And we need to stand up to that. We need to have better processes in place. We need to make sure that all of our military, everyone else is trained, and they're taking all of that extremely seriously. And I'm not putting any blame on anybody else or anything else. it was an unfortunate situation, but that first pull of the trigger was evil versus good. And I always say love wins. And love is going to win in this case, and it always is, because good always wins. We will ride on that white horse wearing our white cowboy hat, and we will say yeehaw at the end, because good always wins no matter what, right? So
good Texas boy, eh? Got the white hat and the white horse. I love it. Todd, pal, you couldn't have said it any better. James and I had chatted over the weekend, and I was absolutely irate about exactly that. 'Cause I'm like, the shot that was shot was not at a man. It was at an ideology. It was about 55 million people, and you nailed that. Todd, I can't think of a better way to wrap it up. Again, I say, pal, the things that you're doing with your community, and again, reach out. Walking Tall, they've got a fantastic crew, and the new podcast is called what? Give us a shout out.
I'm going in. Yep. I'm going in, and if you'd like to learn more about me, you could go to toddblyleven.com.
Yep.
That's got my story on there. It's got a little bit about the book I'm writing. I've got a free 12-page How to Walk Tall guide that I created. That's pretty cool if you're experiencing any type of trauma. But toddblyleven.com, and then of course I'm all over on social. But and then the Walking Tall movement. You got to follow us there. We'll come back here in a little bit once we all kind of get our kids situated and whatnot. We'll be back.
If there are people that were at that unfortunate shooting, that terrible atrocity, can they reach out to you? How does that work?
Of course. Reach out to me. Email me, Instagram me, Facebook me, LinkedIn me. info@toddblyleven.com is my email. But reach out. I've got an incredible resource on Walking Tall, walkingtallmovement.com. We've got a huge resource page with all types of different pieces, for people to be able to go and seek help. But reach out. I've got incredible stories too of people that are sharing stories of strength and resilience on I'm Going In on the podcast, and that's all we're trying to do. I'm trying to get out and speak more. I want to be able to share my story of resilience and strength, being vulnerable. So always looking to get out and speak to audiences and stuff around the world. But reach out, and if it's not me, reach out to someone. Talk 100%. To your buddy. Your buddies are there. They're not going to make fun of you. They're going to realize, like, holy shit, Pat's messed up. I need to be there. Sorry, I'm not going to be able to go out and whatever play softball that night. Yeah. Pat, you and I are going to go have a beer, buddy, and we're going to talk. Yeah. They will be there. So it's in our nature.
But Todd, that is exactly where this came from. Because again, Chris, when we talked with Chris and we got to know his story and the wildly traumatic events, again, same sort of situation. That's where you stepped in. He's like, literally, this guy fell out of the sky, and all of a sudden I'm sitting in front of him, we're shooting the shit, and we're having these voice calls, these online voice chats. Todd, you've walked the walk. You've clearly been that guy to jump in and help people. Todd's not bullshit. Like, this is a guy you can reach out to, and if you need that help, he's going to be there, and he knows this whole group of people that are doing the same thing. Todd, you're doing God's work. God bless you. I appreciate you coming on here, pal. Keep doing what you're doing. It's amazing stuff. You guys are taking a psychological perspective. It's wild what you guys are diving into. And for me, pal, I want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you both. You guys are doing amazing work yourself. This is a great podcast. Thanks, huge fan. So thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, man. You are, I don't care what you say, you're a true hero during the moment. You're a true hero now. I'm going to keep on flogging that because I think you are literally changing the lives of people who had their worst day and lift them up. And if that is not God's hand, I don't know what is. I 100% agree that he was with you that day, just like he's with all of us. And I'll tell you right now, if you're listening and you're a man and you're a manly man, I feel like maybe I'm not as manly as some people. But there was a time that I was going through like a terrible time, and I had my buddy Pat, and I sat down and I cried in front of him, and I told him my story, and fully expecting him, because you watch us, we're assholes to each other all the time.
Yeah.
And he was nothing but caring, And now we're deeper friends because of it. I'm telling you right now, you will not be rejected. So please get out there and talk to people. Todd, thank you so much for coming on. I have had tears off and on through this because you do bring that emotion without, that thing where you're saying you don't want them to picture the bloodshed. You want them to picture the feeling and the emotion. And you do that very well. You're a gifted speaker, and I'm telling you right now, you are doing God's work, and I really do love you for it. Soaring Prophets out there, profiteers out there, get in touch with this man. If you're feeling that you feel alone, you're not alone. He's going to help you out. Todd, is there anything that you would like to tell someone right now who is suffering from some sort of PTSD? Give them some form of advice, or reach out to them some way, and we'll end on that.
You're tough. You've gone through that challenging time, and it's not going to get easier in the early stages, but you will get through this. And you're not alone, like James and Pat have just been saying. You're not alone. Reach out to someone. Raise your hand. Say, I'm struggling on the inside. You're not alone. Find a relatable therapist. If you can't afford one, then reach out to us. Reach out to me. I will help find somebody, or I'll just talk to you personally. Okay? We are all in this together. This world has got to be together, but you're not alone. So if you're listening with your earbud and you're struggling right now, realize you're not alone. You gotta raise your hand and say, I need some help.
Amen, brother. Amen. I love it.
Country strong. That's what I call it. Country strong. Let's go.
Take care, guys.